you need to be your own superhero. You need to rescue yourself. You need to realize that it's your life. You might need to get help, and there is help out there, but ultimately your happiness, your life is your responsibility.
Well, here we are back in the LinkedIn Live studio for my 54th LinkedIn Live broadcast and my second one of 2021. Today, I'm joined by Kallum with a K, Kallum Russell, from an organisation called UNpreneur. Now, 2021, of course, with the pandemic, is affecting everything. And I've decided to bring Kallum in to talk about student and graduate enterprise. So first of all, Kallum, welcome. And can you tell us a bit about yourself to start with, please?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Andrew. It's great to be here. How far back do you want to go? No, let's just look at a kind of potted history then. Since I graduated myself, just about 10 years ago, I've been involved in startup land, whether it's working for startups or having my own. So I've been involved in entrepreneurship for nearly 10 years now. And throughout that whole time, I've had a lot of ups and downs, as we're going to cover today. But as you mentioned, the current business is UNpreneur.
Okay, so tell us about UNpreneur. Unusual name.
Yes, nice of you to ask. So unexpected, this question. Well, you know me, I like to keep things unusual, being Kallum with a K, so it just made sense to have a business name that ultimately makes no sense to anyone but me. Really, it came from a frustration with entrepreneurship, the kind of toxic entrepreneurship. What I mean by that is there's a certain rhetoric in the media, largely American, but not always, about this entrepreneur who works 50 hours a day and doesn't see their partner or their children and blah, blah, blah. And we found that quite suffocating, and it's quite a dangerous message. Now, you and I both have our own businesses, so we know that there are days that are particularly long and may never end, but doing that forever is just so unsustainable. So UNpreneur really is cutting through all of that noise of business advice and the myths and the everything else, and just telling people direct and straight, here is what you really need to know to launch and grow a business right here, right now. And UNpreneur is really business training, mentoring, and courses for students and graduates who are serious about making an impact, whether that impacts by starting a business rather, or having a job and thinking like an entrepreneur or an unpreneur.
Okay, good. So what was your sort of motivation for starting it up?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, like I said, I've been involved in this space for a while. I've had a few different businesses, a few different projects that I've tried, but really it's support that I wish I had at university for my businesses. And we see that, like I said a second ago, that kind of direct, jargon-free, here's what you really practically need to know. We feel that's missing to an extent, particularly for students and graduates. So really, UNpreneur is what I wish I had when I started a few years ago.
Okay, now you mentioned, Kallum, that you've had businesses. What would you say has been your biggest challenge running your own business?
I mean, there are so many, and it depends on the time of day, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I think one of the consistent ones is the overwhelm, and it's just there's so much to do all the time, and it's juggling, it's spinning plates and juggle balls. It's all at once and more, and you have to do so much to run a business. You have to do finance, marketing, client work, and everything else. So I think that overwhelm, plus that backdrop of what I said a minute ago, with that kind of image that you have to do all this, the media says, or these certain magazines or online blogs say you have to do that kind of rhetoric there. So I think it's just cutting through that and just really having that focus, and that comes with experience, making mistakes. It comes from having a team of people you know, trust, like, have a laugh with, but also have the same vision that you have and really are passionate like you. Having systems and processes, having self-discipline, and knowing where you're going. You know, you need to know what you're aiming towards, otherwise you'll go anywhere. To paraphrase the mad cat in Alice in Wonderland. So I think it's all of that. It's just that overwhelm and dealing with that and focus, and just having all of that. And equally, final thing I'd say on this point is having great mentors, people who help you, inspire you, challenge you, develop you. And I've got a French friend called Antoine who has a really nice phrase that he shared with me. They say in French, they say, passing the ladder back, which I really quite like. So I told him I'd steal it one day. And a shout out to you, Andrew. I know you didn't ask me to do this at all, but just want to say thank you for mentoring me the last few months. I found that really exceptionally useful, insightful, and because I'm a kind of jazzy marketing guy, I like to be challenged at our meetings. I found it extremely useful, so thank you.
Great. Just going back to just the earlier part of your answer to that question about the biggest challenge, I actually started EM Bid when I was 47 years of age. Can you imagine that? And yet, even at that, you know, with many, many years of work experience behind me, I did find it immensely challenging, you know, starting your own business. And just exactly what you said, Kallum, thinking about all these things that you need to do, but also all that other noise that's out there of people telling you things you could be doing or should be doing. And round about that same time, I was headhunted for a job. I hadn't even applied for a job, headhunted for a great job. And I was slightly tempted. I thought, you know what, there's easier ways of going on. But I really wanted to start my own business. And I got to the point in my life that I was tired of working for others and really wanted to try it. Didn't know how it was going to go. Fortunately, it's going very well. But certainly what you're talking about of giving support for younger people starting in business is absolutely vital. Now, UNpreneur are not the only people out there offering this assistance with student and graduate enterprise. So what differentiates you from any competition that's out there?
Yeah, and almost every day the competition, it seems more vast when you look at Google is the ultimate competition to all of us, really. A lot of the universities and colleges provide some level of student enterprise, and there are other providers, whether state funded or private or whatever else, and they've all got a place, and they're right for the people who it's right for, if you take what I mean by that. So how are we different? Well, first of all, as has been said, we're entrepreneurs first. So we are business owners ourselves. So we've been through the journey, we can relate to it. The challenges, the knockbacks, the frustrations, the ups and the downs, the practical stuff. And that is really important, that practical stuff that is sometimes missed in certain universities and colleges, even in business degrees, having that really practical, how do you register a company? What is that? How to deal with a difficult customer? How to deal with a challenging staff member? What if things go right? We never really talk about success. We're usually so focused on things going wrong, but actually taking a stance to think, what could happen if this goes really well? So I think just having all of that. So it's the practical knowledge that we provide. We've been there ourselves when we're still there. And I think the third thing is energy, passion. You know, for me, this is not a job. This is not a role. This is my life. And I've dedicated myself to helping students and graduates in some ways since I graduated just about 10 years ago. So, and like you said, there are definitely easier ways instead of being headhunted there. I've also been approached even recently, and sometimes you do think the grass is greener, but that works both ways too. So I think I would be so bored in a job, unemployable, whatever else. So I think for me, it's just that this is our passion. This is what we do. It's in our DNA, and I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Okay, and it was interesting there, you were talking about what if things go right, and of course that can happen. What I found is that the work sometimes, you know, doesn't come in evenly, so you can be too quiet And if you're too quiet, that's obviously concerning. But you then swing from being too quiet to being too busy. And it's just, trying to manage these peaks and troughs that come in. Now, you mentioned earlier on about mentoring. Separately, which people give you, can you draw in inspiration from? Who would you say inspires you?
Yeah. I mean, the first person that inspires me in my life is my mum. She's the strongest person I know. She's so inspiring. She's so caring by nature. In the really bad snow that we had recently, the bad weather, she was the first person out when it was safe to do so, and checking on the neighbours. And that's obviously difficult given COVID as well. But she was just checking that we're okay, we're warm enough and enough food, and that's the sort of person she is. And for me, as both a person and a business owner, I think that's certainly my inspiration. My mum's a huge inspiration to me. But in terms of business context, I'm inspired by almost everyone I meet. I take inspiration from everything, from the people we work with, our customers, to other people, and even over the Christmas break, I watched a whole bunch of documentaries about Elvis and Lady Gaga and Oasis. And although I haven't met them, I took a lot of inspiration from their story and their struggles, and the fact that even people who are successful really do struggle with stuff that you and I just might think they don't, because they've got it all, or at least on the face of it, they have it all. So I think my mindset has always been to take inspiration from everywhere and everything. So I'm not going to say a cliche like Branson or Elon Musk, although I hugely admire them, and I do to an extent. I am inspired by them, much like most people. But in terms of the day-to-day, it's certainly my mum and people we work with in our team, and just other people. I get inspiration from everywhere.
I really like that answer you've given, Kallum, because you're talking about we can learn from just about anybody, can't we? And I like that, rather than just having one or two figures, but you're really, starting close to home. You're sort of nearest and dearest to people that are in your closer circle. And then as you widen out, you're learning from others, but you're also obviously not just learning from people that you come into contact with, but through reading or watching content, you're learning from others. Really, really good. Advice now is something that we get a lot of along the way when we're in business. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever got, and what is the worst piece?
That is a very good question. I think the number one piece of advice that always has stuck with me, that was when I was at university. I went to Heriot-Watt University, studied business management with marketing, and in my final year, my dissertation advisor, Dr. Dodd, said to me, "Challenge everything, challenge everything," and that has always stuck with me. Whether it was at university, whether it's in business, whether it's in whatever context, really, I think that's so important. And I think a lot of people just accept things. And there's a time and a place for doing that, of course, and it's all contextual. All advice is contextual. But I think for me, that challenge everything. If you're a business owner and you really do want to succeed, you have to challenge everything. You have to challenge advice you're given, even by professionals and experts. You need to challenge what your teams say when it's healthy and appropriate to do so. And most importantly, you must challenge yourself. And I said to you before we went on this call, on this live, this is my first ever live, so part of me is quite nervous, but I'm also super excited because I know that I want to get more comfortable with being this level of uncomfortable. So I think, challenge everything is probably the best advice. There's been a lot, but that's the one that's always stuck with me since university.
Good. Any bad advice that you just thought, that was just worth ignoring, really, or?
There's a lot of that for sure, and like I made reference to earlier with some of these entrepreneurs, these superstar entrepreneurs that are held up as phony icons, but more closer to home. There was someone who said to me a few years ago, pat on the head type thing, like, there, Kallum. Just stick to little Fife, the region I'm from. Just stick to little Fife. Just stick to your remit. You've got a good thing going, and just stick to that. Don't get above your station, type thing. And it's just funny how if I had chose to listen to that, things might be very different, and you and I might not be speaking now, and entrepreneur might not even be a thing. So I think it's a healthy level, and it goes back to the first point of challenging everything. Is I just knew that was bad advice. So if I had listened to that, we wouldn't have grown to Dundee and then running the incubator at the business school in Edinburgh like we do now, and working with customers and universities and colleges all around the UK and now Europe. So I think that is probably among the worst advice I've been given, was just to stick to Fife.
Yes, and do you know what? It probably came from somebody who had done similar to that, and maybe things had worked out quite well for them. But you were thinking differently, and I think at times like that you have to just trust your gut as well and follow that. But sometimes even doing that, it does sometimes lead to failures. So, and you know what? I think people can learn so much from failures as well. So tell us about your biggest failure. What happened and what did you learn from it?
So, yeah, there's been a number of hiccups, but in terms of failures, which is a different thing altogether, the first business I launched after graduation just didn't work out. For various reasons. It was a very quick history. It was an online events website to promote local events and uniquely allow the event to raise extra money. So if you were a sports club or a local choir or whatever group you were, a community group, the business model was you would put your event on our website at the cost of £4. Local businesses would then pay to sponsor your event page, because each event got a page to talk about where the event was, what the event was, pictures, video, the usual. And there would be a right-hand column where local businesses could pay to sponsor that. And that would give the local business some PR, some recognition for supporting things locally. And all of that money, 100% of the money raised from the sponsorship would go to the organizer. It's a great way of, like I say, the scout group or whoever raising additional money. I still think it's a great idea. This is 7, 8, 9 years ago. But sadly, it didn't work out for many reasons. But I think one of the biggest reasons was, and I hold up my hands here as the marketing guy or the self-professed marketing guy, and I mentioned it earlier as well, I alluded to that, I did a bad marketing job, to be perfectly honest. And I did have a little bit of build it and they will come syndrome. I thought because the website was so good, I didn't swear there, so good, I thought people would just automatically, like a magnet, be drawn to it because it just sold itself. It's so fantastic. I have the easiest marketing job ever. I just do nothing. And how wrong that is to have that mentality. And I look back, I just cringe now and I just wonder about myself. But yeah, I think that was a big lesson. So I think the lesson from all of that is you as a business owner have to go out of your way to explain to people your story, why you're different, why they should care. There's a part of that that's like using a megaphone. And by that, I mean, certainly in the UK, we have a real problem talking about ourselves, whether it's on LinkedIn or on social media, or whatever else, we're kind of told to, just keep yourself to yourself type thing. And so you need to kind of unlearn that. Part of it is also there's so much noise out there, as I mentioned earlier, and also people don't really care about you necessarily unless your values chime with them and they're looking for what you have at the time. So I think the lesson is that there's a lot of layers to this, but I think I'll round up this ramble by saying that not everyone will care about you and your business and will therefore be appropriate or a customer of you, and actually that's okay. That's actually a very good thing that even half people don't like you and half love you. I think that's a really good place to be as a business, for sure, because you cannot work with everyone, and neither should you want to or aspire to.
That's interesting, Kallum. So what you're saying is Marmite is better than vanilla.
That's a good way to put it. I might have to steal that for a little Instagram quote or something. I'll put your face on it.
No, it's okay. You can have it free gratis, but Marmite is better than vanilla because at least 50% of people really like you. So yeah. Interesting. Interesting concept. Now, you've been working in student and graduate enterprise for a number of years now, even though you've just launched this new business for doing it. So what have been some of the previous successes in student and graduate enterprise that you're able to point to?
Sure. So yeah, as you say, we've been in this space for quite a while, and with the new label, UNpreneur, that we just launched at the tail end of last year. But certainly myself and our team have been involved for quite some time. But in terms of our longest engagement in recent terms, we've been lucky enough to run the Edinburgh Business School Incubator, which is based at Heriot-Watt University, and we actually helped create that, and we've managed it since July 2018. So it's been coming up for sort of 2.5 years. And just last week, we actually kicked off the 5th intake. So we've got another 7 businesses joining the incubator. And for me, success is so fluid, and I use the word context again, which is becoming my buzzword of 2021 already. Context is so important, and that was for me a big lesson from last year, just having context of a situation. But success to one person is different to another. So over the 2 years rather, there's been 30 businesses, 30 people in the incubator we've been lucky enough to work with, and they've all made successes in their own way because they've all made progress. For some, it was literally getting an idea from their head into their first prototype. For others, it's securing investment. For others, it's making their first sale, recruiting their first team member. So success is so different for everyone. Success is actually realizing that it's not for them, I would argue, and trying something else. Or as I did, this vehicle isn't right. Let's try a different business. But in terms of answering your question with specifics, I want to tell you a very quick story about Faisal, Dr. Faisal Ghani. Faisal is an academic and is passionate about renewable energy, and that's what he did his PhD in, particularly solar energy. And which you might not know what solar is in Scotland because it's never sunny here ever. So Faisal came to the incubator. He was actually the very first cohort in July 2018 and had the Inventipod, was his first business. And to cut a lot of the story out, basically, it was a portable box that he made to store all of his things in, and it could open up on any work surface and turn that into a work surface for maybe soldering or doing sort of workshop with tools, and then it would just fold away again. And he created that because he couldn't find anything like it on the shelf, so created his own product by solving his own problem. He did it for the first year in the incubator, so that was his first year in the incubator, and then realized this wasn't the right vehicle for him, much like I did with my events website. This isn't where I meant to be. So he changed his business entirely and went back to the start, as it were, and looked at renewables, which is his biggest passion. And if you speak to Faisal, any conversation comes to climate change, something he's really passionate about. And Faisal has now created the world's first prism-shaped solar thermal collector, which means basically the box he's created, or the prism, it takes sunlight and heats up water, and it's flat pack. So for him, the biggest market is the developing world, where it can be low cost, it can be stored in the back of a bike, it's flat pack, it can be moved around very easily, and it's quite cheap to run and assemble. And that's a huge challenge, to have consistent electricity in many parts of the developing world. And Faisal's solution solves that. And what's interesting about this whole story, as if that wasn't interesting enough, is Faisal actually had a grant to test his Solaris kit, as it's called, out in Africa. But unfortunately, given the pandemic with COVID, he had to completely stop that and had to change again. And now he's focusing right now on the UK market, glamping, holiday parks, caravan parks, and really any building that has a flat roof where they can sit on top, that can replace a lot of the really nasty energy. So Faisal now has actually just secured a place in Dundee in the Innovation Centre, or park over there, to grow this even further. Just secured a lot of investment. He's now got a really big team. So for me, seeing Faisal come into the incubator as an academic with, and I hope Faisal, you take it in the nicest possible way, with not a lot of practical business experience prior, to then now growing 2 years later to having a team, developing the world's first solar prism, and now going to be doing something that fundamentally tackles climate change head on, for me is why I do what I do. It just excites me, and I find it so rewarding and fulfilling just being part of that very small part of Faisal's journey, because full credit to him and his team, have done an amazing job.
What a great story, Kallum. And it just shows that, I think even just listening to the story about Faisal, I'm hearing lots of pivots, which was the kind of word, one of the main words of 2020, and will continue to be this year as well. Marvelous. Okay. Now, just thinking though, what do you think prevents students and graduates from starting their own businesses? What type of barriers either exist structurally, or it could be a kind of mindset barrier?
Yeah, a great question. I think there are four main things. There are probably more, and given we don't have enough time for me to speak as much as I'd like to, because I could speak all day on these things, I'll condense it to the four and keep it quite brief. I think it's really having a business idea, or one that you think's viable, experience, money, and then family, friends, other human beings. Let's just classify it as that. So very quickly, in a nutshell, not having a business idea. Where do ideas come from? We hear so many students when we do guest lectures for universities and colleges say, I'd love to have my own business one day. I just don't have an idea right now. But to my mind, businesses start by solving a problem, much like Faisal did, because he couldn't find the solution to store his tools in and then make any surface a work surface. So he created it. And then equally, he discovered the issue, or didn't discover it, but the issue of consistent electricity in parts of the developing world that I just mentioned in that story there. He created the Solaris kit. So you solve a problem. So businesses exist to solve a problem. That's really it, when you strip away all the emotion and everything else. So really, I would encourage students and graduates, listen to problems actively. What are your friends saying? What are your family saying? Your partner, your fellow students and colleagues? Listen to problems. And then the second part is, well, how do you know if it's a big enough problem? Is it a hobby or a business? And there's nothing wrong with a hobby, absolutely not. But if you want to make it a career and you want to live off it and employ people, etc., it needs to be a big enough problem that people are willing to pay for. And there's a whole bunch of stuff on that, but we don't have time for that. Second one is experience or imposter syndrome. A lot of graduates and students don't feel ready to start a business. Even those that did business studies, they just feel they need to get a graduate job first. They need to just wait a few years to get experience. And again, context, maybe that is right for some, whereas others, I would argue, really are ready. And the only thing stopping them, as you said, is their mindset or them. Thirdly is money. I still challenge that a little bit, because you don't need as much money as you think to start a business. And not to start with, you might need money, but you can raise money if you think about things differently. And then the fourth one, as I mentioned, is other people, other humans, whether it's partner, family, friends, careers, mum and dad, saying, don't get a job or go and get a job, don't start a business. People like us don't start businesses, or as I heard, stick to 5 Kallum. So I think you need to just, all four of those, I would argue, is mindset, underpins all of that. Because to paraphrase Tony Robbins, it's not your lack of resources, it's your lack of resourcefulness. So when you don't have money, you need to find ways to create money. If you're a student, you've probably got old clothes you don't wear, sell them. Your old uni textbooks, they're like £100 each or £5 million each, get them sold. So there are ways you can create money to then make progress with your idea, and start small. You don't need to go all in. There's this really bad myth again from these superstar entrepreneurs, you have to go all in at the start. You don't. You can experiment, start small, even whilst working part-time or full-time. So I think all of that's mindset. It can be taught, and I think that's the biggest thing to stopping students and graduates.
Yeah, and you know what, I'd just add to that, just everything you've said there, Kallum, I agree with completely. I'd also say get your minimum viable product or service out there quite quickly and quite early on. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. So it actually can be possible to get something started and then learn while you go, because nothing beats getting real live customer feedback and make changes accordingly and carry on. That's the only other thing I would offer there. Now, what would you say colleges and universities could be doing right now to boost enterprise support?
Yeah, this is something we're really passionate about, because if you look at any recession or downturn in the economy, putting aside all the really horrible stuff, and again, not belittling that, but just giving it context, universities and colleges, they're on this kind of spectrum. So some do this stuff really well and some don't even do it. So, if you're not doing it, set aside a budget for student enterprise, because it's so vital. Because given the current situation, students are going to have to, create their own job by having a business. So this stuff really matters. So if you don't have a budget, create one. If you are doing it, do more. What does more look like? Well, when was the last time you tweaked things? Obviously, we've all moved online, so that's a very obvious change. But is the course content still relevant for the current situation of what COVID's done to the planet? So I think it's create a budget, tweak, and really speak to your students and ask them what they need and what they want and how they want it delivered. And unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to people. So again, and not all universities are in this category, but it comes down to leadership and politics. And so really there needs to be buy-in, there needs to be autonomy, there needs to be staff need to be given. We are really here to champion the enterprise people, because they're fantastic. They're often the unsung heroes in many universities and colleges who are maybe taken for granted, or really they've been asked to do a lot of work recently. We've seen it since March, since the first lockdown. The numbers have increased overall in terms of more students asking for help, more graduates asking for this help from their student enterprise team, and they're being overstretched, and they're having a tough time too. So I think supporting that team, investing in that team, whether it's more staff members to increase that capacity to deal with that demand, more services, and just more investment. Because if we don't do that as a society, in my singular lens of blinders on it, like a racehorse, then we are failing the next generation. And I really mean that. And I choose those words quite carefully, but I mean it. We are failing because it's an abdication of responsibility not to prepare students and graduates for 2021 and beyond. It's no good looking at last year what worked then. It needs to be practical stuff, a mindset again as well for the future, this really crazy future.
Yeah, I think so true there, Kallum, because the purposes of colleges, universities is to train people for the working world. But actually, the working world is changing all the time, and it does contain, people who work for themselves, people who maybe work in partnership with others, people who set up their own businesses. It isn't all going to be people that are necessarily going to be creating the next multinational business, but often the businesses will be small, they'll be local. It might just be that they're providing for that person's own needs, and that is enough. But do you know what? It's vital that all universities and colleges really have student enterprise as part of what they're doing. But also that I think what you're saying, Kallum, is that they take a fresh look at the way that they're actually delivering this. And I'm quite happy to give a plug for what you're doing. I think if a college or university is watching this, or a student even, by all means, go to your university or college and say, speak to Kallum Russell. UNpreneur, see what UNpreneur have got to offer, because they've got a great market offering that is actually very relevant and very current, and that has been built on their own experiences as young graduates of starting their own businesses, sometimes failing, but learning from that as well. Now, it is a tough time, particularly for graduates. So if you were speaking directly to a graduate, they've graduated, there's no job for them, what would you say to them?
It's funny because I'm having this conversation quite a lot with students and graduates right now. And in fact, I'm actually giving a guest lecture tomorrow at a university where I'm speaking to final year students. So it's definitely been in the forefront of my mind for a number of months now. You know, unfortunately, a lot of graduates have taken since March, since the first lockdown, as a kind of graduate holiday. You know, there's no jobs, so I'll just sit and play my computer or whatever else, which is lovely, and I hope you're doing really well with that. And I love playing my computer too, but in terms of a career, in terms of that forward thinking, what a waste of an opportunity, you know. And as an employer, I would be, you know, what have you done since March? You played your Xbox, you know, fantastic. Whereas we actually interviewed a girl called Kirsty Byers on our YouTube channel, Student Enterprise TV, and Kirsty had not long graduated from Heriot-Watt University, where I went as well, and she was made furloughed in her graduate job, and she decided just to launch a business because she needed to make money. It was that hunger. It was that I need to do something. Whether this leads to a career or not, but right now I need to make money and I want to do something. I want to be busy. I want to be useful. I want to provide value, and I want to train myself. And I would argue running a business is the best way you can train yourself. It's the best personal development you'll ever do. You learn so much about lots of different things. And Kirsty's got Crunch Edinburgh, a little plug for Kirsty. They do beautiful platters to your house, delicious stuff. Check them out on Instagram, and it's Crunch Edinburgh or Crunch Platters. And she just did that because she was furloughed. I think they're really interesting things. So you could have two graduates and one say, I can't start a business because of lockdown or because of furlough. Whereas people like Kirsty say, I started my business because of lockdown, or I started my business because of furlough. The thing is, it's all mindset, Andrew. And that's been the consistent theme today for me. But I think it's treating this, and everyone's different. So the word context again for the 20th time. You know, we're in crisis, a really tough time, and I'm not belittling that, and everyone deals with that differently. But I think you need to be your own superhero. You need to rescue yourself. You need to realize that it's your life. You might need to get help, and there is help out there, but ultimately your happiness, your life is your responsibility. So I think your life is your responsibility too, in the same vein. So you have to think of the future, what's next, what's coming up. And much like Kirsty, just by starting something, you might not know where it leads. It might not be your career forever, but it's certainly attractive to an employer. If I'm looking at two graduates for our next role and see that one's played their Xbox since lockdown and one's started their own business, I know who I'm going to hire, and I'm sure you'd be the same, Andrew, without putting words in your mouth. So I think really it's about realizing that there's opportunity for self-development here, and it doesn't have to be starting your own business. There's online courses like what UNpreneur runs, but there are other ones too. You could learn a new skill, because when it comes to the job market, there are jobs, but there are so few. And unfortunately, the employers are picking the most skills. So why wouldn't they? So if you need to upskill yourself to be in that conversation, now's the time to do it. So yes, play your Xbox, but at the same time, yes, develop yourself and think about your future and be proactive about it.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Kallum, also perhaps consider volunteering. You know, because there are many things just now in the pandemic, many different things that people can do to volunteer to help others. And that also will help you with the sort of people skills that are really needed as well, whether you're looking for a job or you're looking to start your own business. And even in volunteering, you may actually identify that business need. You know, that you said that you have to identify some kind of niche, something specialist that you can actually set up doing. So, yeah, I think your message is zig while everybody else is zagging.
Absolutely. I'm Kallum with the K for a reason. So, you know, I've always thought differently to everyone, you know.
Absolutely. And do you know what? I think that's so vital. The people that are thinking differently just now, the young people that are going out there, they may be volunteering, or they're taking advantage of the time they have to learn new skills, or they're getting started with, their own business idea, then these people are going to be much better placed than perhaps the others who've just sat back during this period. But I think it was good that you also mentioned that it's had quite an impact on people and also on their mental health as well. And for some people, if they're really feeling very down about things, then getting access to some counselling or some support could just be the thing that helps them to then move past that stage and start working more positively. So COVID-19, how is it changing things for student entrepreneurship, and what changes do you think will actually be permanent?
COVID just consumed last year for all of us, and I still don't think we've all dealt with it yet, because it's just, we're still in the moment, we're still there. So I think the true impact is still not known to an extent, but clearly there's been a real acceleration to online. I had a really good chat last week with Andrew Dobby from Made Brave, another great Scottish company that you should definitely check out. And he's certainly been a real inspiration to me as well. And one of the points he made was that, before COVID, BC, I like to call it, there was this platform whereby the status quo was that it was just the odd person here and there that was doing online content, videos, podcasts, LinkedIn Lives, whatever else. Whereas now, because we're all on LinkedIn, or we're all live, I should say, on this virtual world, that's the new barrier. So it's taken it a step or two, about many steps up. That's the new given, that's the new normal. So now it's about, how do we stand out from that? And Andrew's just put Andrew Dobby's put a really good post up on LinkedIn today about his home studio setup, and he's saying how he's kind of kitted it out to differentiate him, and to just that perception of who they are and what their brand is. And I think living your brand is so important, as Andrew does do. So I think it's about how you're perceived, and there are things you can do to control how you're perceived. So I think for students, like I said, the bar has gone up many levels. It's been accelerated. We're still in the moments. We're still dealing with it. But to my mind, it goes back to what I said earlier, Andrew. There are so many challenges right now in the world. Full stop. New sentence. But particularly because of COVID, or due to COVID, there are even more problems. So if there's students and graduates watching this, then there are so many opportunities to help people, which is what all businesses do, is about helping people, solving problems, adding value in return for a commercial return for you, the business owner, or social enterprise, or charity, or whatever vehicle. There's an exchange there, a trade. So look for the problems, and there are many of them due to COVID. So I think it's just changed things permanently, because we're all online. It's about, how do we all step up to meet this new, I hate the phrase new normal, but until I get a better one, this new normal. So I think it's just stepping up, and it's just changed things. We're still dealing with it. So ask me in a year's time.
Yeah, and you know what? I think a lot of 2021 is still going to be taken up with it, although it is great to see the progress getting made with the vaccine rollout, but it's probably still going to be, a fair number of months before we're back to anything like normal, and the normal will have changed. I think the way that we're all using technology, a lot of these changes are permanent changes. So in some ways, very positive as well. Something positive coming out of something that is so negative. Okay, so just finally, Kallum, if people want to find out more about you and your business, UNpreneur, if they're maybe a student or graduate, what is the route and the services for them? Or if they're university or college, perhaps you could just share some info on these two sort of groups.
Well, thank you for allowing me to shamelessly plug our business, UNpreneur. I really appreciate that. Certainly for us, we do have what we call the two parts of the business. There's the services for students and graduates, and then the services for colleges and universities. The website is the main place, unpreneur.com, and that has a section for both of those parties, and it outlines all of the services. But the most popular service in the last few months certainly has been our online business course, Business Stripped Back, and it's really for students and graduates who want to take the first few steps into exploring an idea, changing your mindset, evolving your toolkit as well, and just those first few steps into starting a business. So that's Business Stripped Back. And then it's funny, we speak to a lot of universities and colleges as our other set of customers, and we're actually speaking to them about this, and a number are very interested. We're having some very good conversations about universities and colleges buying licenses for our course en masse, buying lots of them for their students because they're investing in student enterprise, as I mentioned earlier. It's so important. And then linking it to another point you made earlier, Andrew, is in one of these phone calls or Zoom calls that we had with the university, they said, our university's got the startup stuff covered, but if you can do an online course that teaches entrepreneurial skills, or we would call it unpreneurial skills, for students who want to make an impact in a job, would love that. So the Business Stripped Back course had a sister, Impact Stripped Back. So Impact Stripped Back is for those students who want to create impact in a job. So those two are both on the website. Again, unpreneur.com is the best place. You can even actually put in businessstrippedback.com and go straight to the Business Stripped Back page. But all of the information is on the UNpreneur website. We're also all over Instagram. It's just UNpreneur. Same with Facebook. We don't have Twitter because we're giving Twitter the shun for the time being, but we may have it. And then me personally, Kallum with a K, I'm all over Instagram as well, kallumwithak.com, and indeed LinkedIn.
Very good. Thank you. And I really like that point you made as well there, Kallum, that you're able to teach entrepreneurial skills even for people that don't want to currently go and set up a business, but they want to bring entrepreneurial skills into a job. Employers, and speaking as one, I'll tell you this, will love that, because if you've got a member of staff who's wanting to demonstrate entrepreneurialism inside your business, well, how good is that? So I think the offerings that you have, are actually reaching many different audiences there. And I wish you every success with UNpreneur in 2021. And it'd be great to have you back perhaps sometime later this year or early next year to tell us how the first year of UNpreneur has gone. Thank you, Kallum.
Thank you, Andrew. And I look forward to that date in the future for sure. Thank you for the opportunity.